I first just want to thank everyone for joining us today for our Confronting COVID webinar. Today, we're here to learn how to support children after the death of a loved one. And I think it's really important because grief is universal. Everyone will experience it. And it's really important that we know how to help the little ones in our lives. So today we will be hearing from Rosemary Huber. She will be our presenter. And my name is Brooke. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Cove Center for Grieving Children. We have many different programs that help children and families who are grieving a loss, which include our family program, Camp Compassion, Cove in Schools, Caring Connection, our virtual Cove groups, and our Confronting COVID series. The family program is a 20-week program that takes place starting in September and going to June. It's delivered by a licensed therapist as well as volunteer facilitators. We're so grateful for our volunteer facilitators. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without them. So the curriculum in the family program, it's based on creative expression. It's project-based, so kids will come together, they complete different activities, we have different themes, and the whole goal is to help children learn to cope with their grief and to heal, and just to have a safe place where they can process the grief with other people who have experienced something similar. So the families, the children in our program, they have lost someone, a parent, a sibling, a caregiver, someone that was a part of their daily lives. So we have sites that are currently meeting in person. Those sites are Meriden, Guilford, New Haven, West Hartford, and Stonington. Then we also offer virtual groups. So we have a group for teenagers, we have a young adult group, and then we have our male caregiver group. Camp Compassion. So this is a weekend-long sleepover camp where kids come together and, again, learn how to grieve the loss of a loved one. Camp is wonderful because there are fun activities for kids to, come together, have a good time, and activities to help with grief and loss. The camp is free to all campers. Our family program, I also want to mention, is completely free. So each cabin at the camp is going to have a lead clinician, and then there'll be volunteers that will be assisting the campers. Please contact me if you have any questions. Now we will get started with our webinar, Confronting COVID. Rosemary is a licensed professional counselor. She's also certified as a school counselor, and she is currently working with high school students, and she also has a private practice. So I will pass the mic over to Rosemary, and thank you so much.
All right, well, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you to the Cove for having me present. I have to say I was a volunteer at Camp Compassion last June, and it was just an absolute amazing experience. And I will be part of it every year that I can. We were talking about it before we got on here. It was really an amazing experience to be part of camp and everything that the Cove does. They're making huge differences, differences in the lives of a lot of families and children. And it's amazing just over 3 days, the transformation that you can see with these children. So to start, specifically talking about COVID, the impacts of COVID-19 on grief, I think it's important just to take some time to look at these statistics. As of November 16th, 2022, so just a couple weeks ago, there were a total of 1,073,155 deaths due to COVID-19 have been reported in the United States. So that's right on the CDC website. 40% of Americans say they know one or more people who have died of the disease, and 15% of Americans report that a family member had died. So again, I think it's just so important to take a second to kind of look at these numbers. We've all been through a lot in the past few years, and I just think it's important to remember how many people have been impacted. I'm sure some of you on this call have had direct impact. And if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat. We'll try to check that at the end too. So when we're thinking about COVID, it's important to note two different types of losses. So we have a primary loss, which is the death of a loved one. So that's if someone had died as a result of COVID, that would be a primary loss. But in addition, there were so many secondary losses. So there were losses of intimacy, relationships, loss of employment, financial security, healthcare. For children, there was time with peers at school, enrichment activities, play dates. And I remember this so clearly working in a school. You know, it was March 13th and we're thinking we're going out maybe till April break. And very quickly we realized that we were going to be out for an extended period of time, and things were going to be different. So we had students, you know, even as they returned to school over the last, you know, couple of years, we had the hybrid model. Then we had people are out for extended quarantine periods. So the disruptions to education have been tremendous. And, you know, all of you on this call that are teachers or working in the school system, I really commend you for all that you've done throughout these last 4 years. It's definitely, it's been hard, and we see you, and I know also our healthcare workers, but I, you know, in particular, when I'm thinking about children and education, it was a really, really challenging time, and it still is. We're still dealing with some of the ripple effects from COVID. So when you think about a primary loss, meaning the death of a loved one, and then the secondary losses, this can really cause complicated grief, which we're going to get into in a little bit. So signs of grief, just kind of your general signs of grief. And these could be signs that come from the death of a loved one with COVID, but they could also be things from the secondary losses. So kind of shock, disbelief, denial, apathy, feeling like nothing matters, a lot of fear and anxiety. I think we really all experienced that during COVID. Anger, periods of sadness, loss of sleep and appetite. A lot of times our body lets us know what's going on before we're even able to say how we're feeling. We might see changes in our sleep patterns, our eating habits, you know, obviously the children too. We might feel guilt, regret, self-blame. We might start to question our religious beliefs. A lot of uncertainty and lack of clarity. Again, COVID just compounded all of these things. Loneliness. You know, there were many people that were living at home by themselves, and they, you know, it was scary to go out and meet with someone else. If you were living with a partner or someone who died during COVID, you know, that loneliness, again, just exasperated. And then, you know, difficulty concentrating, and, you know, among many other signs of grief. But again, when we talk about COVID in particular, when someone experienced a death of a loved one due to COVID, and compounded with all the secondary losses, complicated grief, it was kind of like a perfect storm for complicated grief. Which complicated grief is an ongoing heightened state of mourning that keeps you from healing. So I liked this graphic. It kind of shows this intense sorrow and pain over the death of a loved one, constant rumination. So they're constantly focusing on the death. So they're not really able to think about anything else. Whereas when you might see when someone's grieving and they're on more of a healthy, regular, I don't want to say right, like a regular grieving path, you know, you'll see periods of, wow, this was fun, we had a good day, and then kind of go back into that sadness where when someone's really in this complicated grief, it's hard to see or do anything else or to find joy in anything else. Inability to accept the loved one's death, numbness, detachment, bitterness over the death. And then they might find, you know, loss of meaning or purpose in their own life. Inability to enjoy things, carry out normal routines, or recall pleasant memories. So that inability to go back and say, oh yeah, I remember this, that was a great time, pulling from those pleasant memories to kind of help healing. A belief that you could have caused or that the death could have been prevented. And again, with COVID, I've seen this come up more, even, you know, in my private practice too, especially with someone, you know, passing away from COVID. There's this fear that we're going to get grandma sick, or did I cause this? Did I bring this home from school? Was it because I went to my friend's house? You know, we're all talking about keeping safe, and our kids are hearing these things. So it's important, you know, we'll get into this, but it's really important that children in particular know there is nothing they did to cause the death of their loved ones. And then feeling, you know, just kind of despondent and wishing that they were dead along with their loved ones. So it's really important, if you're seeing any of these signs of complicated grief, you know, in yourself, in your loved ones, in your students, that you that we connect them to get more care. So how do children grieve differently than adults? Children's grief reflects their current stage of development. Children's grief is often accompanied by regressive behavior. So this is really important to remember as we go through some of these next slides. The information I share is just kind of estimates of these age groups, but the regression is seen very common when a child is experiencing grief, that they're going to go back and kind of act almost the way some of the previous groups, younger age groups act. Children express their grief through behaviors versus their verbal expression. So you see that little guy in the corner, he's really angry. They might not have the words, but they're going to see it in their kind of acting out, their inability to sit still or to do anything, or running around, high energy, low energy, both could be completely normal. And I found this quote, I thought this was great. Any child who is old enough to love is old enough to mourn. And that is very important. I mean, you see these babies come into the world and you know that they love you and they're looking at you with their eyes, and they're depending on you for their care. But I think it's important, I know it is important to remember that all age groups really need love and support after the death of a loved one. So in this first slide, we're going to talk about infants and toddlers, just kind of a little, their pre-language, their primal feelings and needs, and obviously a lack of understanding. They don't necessarily know what's going on, but they know something changed. So common responses would be, they're most affected by the mood of the caregiver, which is, however that primary caregiver is feeling, they're going to pick right up on that. So they're going to have a distressed reaction to the change in routine, maybe crying sporadically or more frequently, eating, sleeping, bathroom changes, increased attachment to the primary caretaker. So that could be the primary caretaker that always was there, or if it was the death of the primary caretaker, the new primary caretaker, and an inability to self-soothe. So a child who is maybe able to get themselves comfortable is going to need a lot more attention and help soothing. So again, how to help. When upset, most infants are soothed by physical contact. So, pick up the bereaved child when they cry, wear them. Those front carriers are really great for kids, especially to let them kind of hear your heartbeat and give them motion, keep them close. Even simple baby massage. Talk and smile at them as much as possible, kind of use concrete language. 0 to 3, with the older kids. So the 2 and the 3-year-olds, you want to make sure you're using concrete language. And this is going to come up again and again, but language like death, died. You don't want to say sleep. You don't want them to be confused, but just being really literal and concrete in the language that you use. And try to keep changes to a minimum. I know this is hard. Obviously, there's been a loss in the family, a death. It's important to try to keep the routine for kids as much as possible. And again, I think it's important to know you cannot spoil a child with too much love and attention, especially following the death of a loved one. That's just keep giving the love and the hugs are usually good for the caregivers too. So age 3 to 6 are preschoolers. They really become more independent at this age. They're starting to focus on the adults and children outside of the family, probably in like a preschool or kindergarten program. They kind of explore and inquire about all the things around them. They learn the consequences of their behavior. Their thinking becomes more concrete and literal. They also have magical thinking, the belief that one's ideas, thoughts, or actions can kind of cause or influence things in the world. So especially with death, it's important to let them know that, they did not cause this death. They didn't do anything to contribute to this death. So common responses might be thumb sucking, bedwetting, their normal anxieties intensified, a real fear of separation and abandonment. They might not want to go or, go to school, things like that. And again, the change in the eating, sleeping, and bathroom, you see that across most of the children. And how to help, it's really keeping that routine, keeping the routine as normal as possible, and try to meet their needs promptly and gently. If you see that something, they need something, try to take care of it as soon as you can. Reassure them that they did nothing to cause the death. Again, that simple concrete language, encouraging play. And it really, back to that routine, it might not be that they're ready to go back to preschool or kindergarten right away, but it's really, even if you have to do shortened days, keeping that routine as much as you can. And just how important the play is, that the children really heal and kind of work things out through play. Age 6 to 11, so our elementary school students, which I know 6 to 11 is a big age jump. You have your first graders up to your fifth graders. But they're really, they're learning through observation, they're exploring independence, they're socializing and developing friend groups. At this age, they start to understand that death is final and irreversible. So common responses, anger, sorrow, confusion, school refusal, emotional reactions expressed through play. So again, they might be playing and you might see kind of them acting out with the characters, whether, they're dolls or they're action figures, increased clinginess, fear of loss, depression, and even some suicidal ideation possibly with the younger kids. They might say, I want to die like grandpa died. And, I want to go to heaven. I miss grandpa, or I miss mom. I miss dad. I miss my brother. So you have to just be aware of those things and get additional help if needed. How to help. I think at this age, it is really important to collaborate with the school. So these kind of how to help things are really geared towards schools and what families and schools can do together. So develop a plan to assist the child, especially in providing emotional help during like an emotional grief outburst. So if a student is in your class or they're acting out, they're crying, we don't want to punish, right? So we know this child is grieving. So what can we do? Let's have an open pass. Let's have a movement break. One of my favorite things is to just, with the younger kids, just take a letter, piece of paper and write a letter to your friend who's on the other side of the building, another teacher, and have that student, hey, can you go bring this to Mr. Smith for me? He's on the other side of the building. He's waiting for this. Here's a ream of paper. Can you go drop this off for him? And then the child gets to feel like they're contributing, they're doing something, and they're kind of getting out and able to move their body. If they're in, crisis, obviously you can go to your support staff, which we'll talk more about at school. And then again, with the workload, so modify, on a temporary basis, we'd like to modify academic expectations, but we don't want to remove all expectations. It's important to keep structure and let the children feel like they're contributing. They want to feel good. We want to make them feel good and proud of what they're doing. But maybe if there's a math homework with 20 problems on it, just circle the top 5 and say, hey, can you work on these 5? And if they can't do them at home, maybe they can work on them in class. So when they, homework's getting passed out, it's not that they didn't participate and they feel good and they have that sticker on their sheet, but that they were part of the class, and that as they're ready to do more, you can add on to that. So again, establish a routine to provide a feeling of safety for the child. Encourage participation in regularly scheduled activities. Again, that's after school activities, in school activities. Provide opportunity for creative play and expression. So, doing art, coloring, and even thinking back on our experience in camp. I mean, there were so many great art activities that the children did, and they didn't even have to be specifically for grief. It's not like, here, we're going to draw a picture and we're going to, draw a picture of mom. But it's just like, let them be free, let them write and talk and say whatever comes out. There's no right or wrong. And then all of a sudden you'll get a picture and, they're doing a family picture and, oh, who's that? Oh, that's grandma. She's in heaven. Oh, tell me about grandma. So this is a long process. It takes a lot of time, but it's just important to have some ideas and kind of encourage them to be creative and use these outlets. So our middle school students, so age 11 to 13, they have a more complete understanding of the finality of death, but they also believe they are invincible. They are, we could do whatever, alternating between dependence and independence. So they're kind of straddling that, elementary school and high school. It's exactly what it is. Those middle school students, they want that independence, but they also do need a lot from the adults around them. And they're exploring new skills. They're trying different things. They might be trying different sports and activities. They haven't quite mastered or figured out one thing that they want to do. Same thing with their academics. They might be trying different things. They're starting to identify with some group norms, so like their gender, different groups at school, different ages. And then they become curious kind of about their philosophical and spiritual beliefs. So the thought of, what else besides just me and this earth, and going through the death, going through the grieving process, they might be influenced by their family's spiritual beliefs. A lot of people call on their spiritual beliefs after the death of a loved one. So common responses, mood swings, we saw those with our middle schoolers before the death of a loved one. So the mood swings are definitely going to intensify. They may also refuse to go to school, or they may become completely immersed in school and just want to be at school. You might see them withdrawn or acting out, easily overwhelmed, self-esteem or confidence issues. Again, that possible depression or suicidal ideation, and poor decision making. So possible substance abuse, promiscuity. And again, this is why it is just so important to kind of keep them in the routine and, have them doing activities and things that are positive. So how to help, you want to provide assistance and flexibility with schoolwork. At this age group, it's usually there's multiple teachers. So now you've gone from maybe having one primary classroom teacher who can manage the expectation to now, possibly 4 or 5 different subject teachers. So I think it is important to kind of connect together using, the school counselor, other school supports to make sure that you are holding the student accountable to work, but in an appropriate way, like an appropriate amount. So maybe scaling down the work, make sure they have a routine and know what to do. Encourage the child to express their feelings, physical activities, creative activities, drawing, journaling, writing songs. I have a lot of students, we have a music program at my school, and the kids just love the music. And I've actually learned a lot about different things related to grief. I also run a grief group at school through music. So I have students that are doing both, and it's really great to see them doing something positive as a result of the grief. And then connecting students to after school programs. I think this is probably one of the most important for this age group. 11 to 13, they possibly, at this age, they might be home alone. They might be helping to care for younger siblings, but school might get out at 2:30. So what are they doing with the rest of the day so that we can make sure that they are not tempted with poor decision making? So if you know of any programs, I would really make sure that these students are connected, especially if it was a possible primary caregiver who had died. So that person who may have been facilitating the after school activities and the things might not be there to do that. And the students are coming to school. The other parent or caregiver might be just getting them to school, it's enough, but let's see, what can we do after? So if you have an after school program, sports, anything, try to get these students in particular involved. So our high school students, these are age like 13 to 18, kind of experimenting with different roles and priorities. They develop their distinct identity, although I have seen it change from 9th grade to 12th grade as they're kind of figuring out who they are. But they turn towards their peers for a sense of belonging. They really want to be with each other. They're starting to have independence and driving. Many of them might be working. They understand that death is permanent. They begin to kind of question the meaning of life. Like, what's next? What's this all about? Continued exploration of their philosophical and their spiritual beliefs. Common responses, the caregiver role, which is a really tough space for these kids to be in. A lot of times they are taking on that caregiver role. And I know, as schools, we can't always, control that, but just encouraging the family, like if there's how we can get them support. So even connecting the family to outside agencies so that the responsibility doesn't have to just fall on the older sibling. And, difficulty managing kind of those big emotions, fear for safety of self and others. So now they have these friends, they're all connected to their friends, and now they understand that death is final and things happen. So they're worried about themselves, they're worried about their friends and something happening. They might be struggling with academics and school attendance, or it could be the opposite, that extreme perfectionism. So they're kind of throwing themselves all into school, or they're not able to concentrate and they're not coming to school. I've definitely seen that where I work after the death of a loved one, where you see increased absenteeism. So again, an increased risk for risky behavior, substance abuse and promiscuity, and that's why we want to really try to double down on getting these kids involved in pro-social activities, positive activities. So encouraging them to ask questions, validate their feelings, give them room to grieve, especially with the students who may be struggling to come to school. Maybe there's another place, maybe they can go into a quiet workspace or have it worked out that they can come and sit down in the school counseling office or the social worker's office, even for just 20 minutes a day. If they know they have that to look forward to, sometimes that can really help get them in the building. And while they're there, just having them do like a little coloring sheet or an activity, or just kind of talking. And again, it doesn't have to be about grief. It's really about kind of building that relationship so that when they're ready to talk, they know that they have a safe adult to go to. And try to maintain structure. That's why I really want to, keep these children coming to school. It's really important for them to come. And when they do come, we want to greet them with, "Great to see you. So glad you're here." Not, where have you been? I can't believe you're not here. You know, you're so far behind. That's only going to deter these students from coming more. And again, be careful not to add on too many responsibilities. A lot of times as the oldest in the family, they can be taking on additional things, and even, you know, seeing students have to work to help support their families, which is important to remember. So just some additional ways on how to support students in school. I really like the idea of, if you know that there was a death in the family, if you can reach out to the grieving student and the family before they return to school. And that really probably depends on the age level and the setup of the school, who would be doing that. You know, maybe in an elementary school, if you know it's one teacher for the class, they might reach out. I know at my school, as a school counselor, I'm usually one of the first to find out whether the student lets me know, or the parent calls it in for attendance, and we know. And then with the students' permission and the family's permission, I like to let the teachers know what the student is going through. And it says, you know, let the grieving student decide how to handle that return. You know, obviously that's going to be, you know, age appropriate. So I'd say like middle school, you know, honestly, even in 4th and 5th grade, you can have a conversation with a student like, hey, I want to let your teachers know, what do you think it's important for them to know? So they really feel like invested in what you're sharing. And at the high school level, I include the students on the email a lot of times. I'll send an email and I'll say, hi, you know, so-and-so is included on this email. We wanted to let you know, just so they hear firsthand what I'm saying. Keep expectations reasonable, balance the routine with expectations, provide learning supports as needed, and use the words death, dying, and dead instead of passed away or lost. And anticipate grief triggers. It's not, you're not always going to be able to know what is a grief trigger, right? There could be this favorite song that he always listened to with his friend, and you know happens to hear it when he's got his AirPod on in the hallway or sneaking in your classroom, and all of a sudden he's upset. But there are other grief triggers that are universal, right? So we have Mother's Day, Father's Day, even graduations. I mean, that's a big one in school, right? You always expected. I always expected Grandma to be at graduation, and she's not here. So as we're celebrating and there's these good things to look forward to, just kind of remember that these could also be really triggering for students. And really don't be afraid to ask how they're doing. I think that sometimes we kind of don't talk, we don't know what to say, so we say nothing. And I pulled up this graphic because I really liked it. You know, kind of the teacher out in the hallway, just pull the student aside. They don't want to be asked how they're doing necessarily in front of their peers, but just taking a minute, pull them aside, even an email. My school uses like a texting app for students. Just, hey, thinking of you, if you need anything, you know, let me know. And they might not respond with needing anything, but you can follow up with, you know, just, I know if homework gets tough, or just let me know if you're struggling with anything. Just starting that conversation and continuing to build that relationship really goes a long way. Remember that grief is unique. So you might have had a student in your class last year whose family member died, and they were fine and they got right back to work. And this student, I can't believe it's taking him so long. We all will process grief differently. And you want to collaborate with your school support staff. I'll talk a little more about that. And again, grief is a lifelong process. So you may have a child in your classroom, you know, you could be in the high school and you could have a child who lost a parent in elementary school. And I will tell you that is still affecting that child at the high school level. It doesn't matter if it's been 5 years or 10 years, they are still thinking about that person, and there will be grief triggers that come up for them. So it is important to know. Actually, right now, I work in a high school, I have seniors, it's college essay season, they're finishing those. So that's always an activity where we learn a lot about students and a lot about you know, experiences that they've had, including the death of loved ones. So a lot of times I know in your classrooms you'll be doing activities and you will learn things about your students. So where to go for additional support? I think in the school is just really important to know who your school resources are. And I know all schools can be different, but obviously I'm a school counselor. I try to make myself available to all my students, but also to the staff. I like to collaborate with the people I work with to let them know I'm here to support. If they have ideas, they usually come to me and say, oh, this is what the student told me. And I absolutely love that, because then we can work together, because the teachers do hear a lot of things before we do. You have a lot of schools have school social workers, school psychologists, your nurse, administration, and a lot of schools have a crisis team. So if you're not sure about your crisis team, definitely ask and see who's on that. And again, there could be a death in your in your school family. And unfortunately, we have experienced that too. So kind of what's that crisis team if there is a death in the family, the school, I say family, I feel like we're a family, but in the school, whether that is, a teacher or a student or someone in the community that was important to many, the coach. So yeah, where to go for additional support. So really self-care, this is I think the most important thing for teachers and just all helping professionals. Self-care must be a priority. There is always going to be one more thing to do, and you have to set healthy boundaries for your time. Create healthy habits. So just move your body, drink water, frequent healthy snacks. So even if you have a prep period or you're walking the kids to a class, just take a minute, take a lap, have a drink of water away from your computer, make a cup of tea, have some frequent healthy snacks ready to go. Plan things to look forward to. So it could be something, and these don't have to be grand things. These could be little things. It could be, meeting with a friend after work. It could be watching a favorite show. There's some, obviously some great stuff on there. Listening to a podcast. There's a little picture of a great self-care for educators podcast. Listening to a book. But have things that you're looking forward to, things that you want to, plan. It could be taking a class, doing just fun, healthy things. And then connect with other helping professionals and educators. Spend time with your pet. I should have put a picture of my dog up here. But yeah, spend time with your pet. Again, read a book, listen to a podcast, and monitor your screen time. I know we all love our devices and we use them in school, right? So after COVID, everyone, had a computer, and we've done so much on Google Classroom and Microsoft. Monitor your screen time and make sure that when you're on social media in particular, that you flood your feed with positivity. I'm not saying don't be on social media, but go through your account and just make sure you're following. There's so much good content out there too. So make sure that you are following good content. And what's good content for me might not necessarily be good content for you. I always say, like, how do you feel when you look at something? You're scrolling through your phone and you see something, and it could be this like amazing picture of a friend or something, and they're out cutting down their Christmas tree with their family of 5, and that's triggering. So you know what, you can hit mute and say, I don't want to see this right now, and that's okay, and they won't know that. But if something feels good, then follow it. With TikTok, look at it for a couple more seconds, so you'll get more of that in your feed. But really monitor your screen time, set boundaries around your screen time, so that you feel good when you're off of that, and set a time limit. It's good to say, like, okay, I can do this for 10-15 minutes. And then take a break, and celebrate your successes. I feel like my educators are not always the best at this. We're moving on to the next thing. There's great stuff going on in and out of the classroom. Same with my peers, the other helping professionals. Good things happen, and then we're quickly on to, like, okay, what's next? And if something doesn't go, a lesson or something doesn't go as planned, we might be thinking about that more. So just really take time to celebrate your successes, share them with your other peers. If something really worked well in your class, or you got through to a student that's been hard, share that information. And if you get stuck, seek professional help. The EAP programs are great. I mean, in all the school districts and most public jobs, really most jobs now. So it's your employee assistance program. And you can usually get like 5 to 6 counseling sessions with no even out-of-pocket copay. And it doesn't have to be for any particular reason. You can just be like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Being a teacher in 2023 or 23 is enough of a reason to contact EAP, or being really in healthcare or any helping profession. So taking the time to talk to someone can be really beneficial in terms of taking care of yourself, so that you're ready to go back in the classroom and work with these students, and especially the students who are dealing with grief. I thank you guys so much for taking the time to meet with us. And really, the Cove is just a wonderful organization. And any of you that are thinking about getting involved, please do. And thank you very much.